Well, the time is just gone 10 minutes past 4, and we continue with the Iftar Drive this afternoon. And this is the final week of the Iftar Drive, and this is the final week of the month of Ramadan. And as we kick off this afternoon, taking a look at or discussing Thandi Smith's opinion piece, which is titled Politics and Media. When politicians are uncomfortable, it means journalists are doing their job. Now, Thandi Smith is the head of programs at the Media Monitoring Africa, and this is what we are discussing this afternoon. Her piece and what it actually contains, and what is it about this piece that makes politicians so uncomfortable. Thandi, good afternoon to you, and welcome to the show.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, quite an interesting piece that you have written, and we know that this comes against a background by political parties that sometimes attack journalists. And in this case, we've seen the attacks on Sakina Kamwendo and the SABC, generally by the Al Jamaa party, which, we say, which you say in this piece, unethical, dangerous, especially in the lead up to our elections. Just looking at this whole relationship, I would say, for want of a better term, between politicians and journalists, and particularly journalists who come under fire.
Yeah. So exactly what you say. The relationship between politicians and politics and media is an interesting one because politicians often use the media to speak to their supporters, to garner support, to campaign, to get coverage. And media have the responsibility to translate a lot of what politicians are saying and political parties, for what they stand for, translated in a way that the electorate can understand and use to make an informed decision when it comes to voting day. Another responsibility of media is to hold those in power accountable. And those in power, for us, sort of include government, local government, or national government, local government. And in this case, in this particular example that I was referring to in the piece, the mayor of Johannesburg. So it has always been an interesting relationship. And what we often find is politicians get very upset with journalists and the media in general when journalists push a particular narrative or agenda and or give them a hard time, make them uncomfortable, and hold them accountable. In this case, yes, sorry.
Yes. Also, I think what is important in what you are saying, and in this particular instance, we are talking about the Al Jamaa party, and the Al Jamaa party somehow are feel that they are being embarrassed to an extent, but also at the same time, like you mentioned, is journalists are just asking the right questions. They are asking certain hard questions, and you mentioned the case of the Johannesburg mayor, Tapelo Ahmed, and perhaps we should just interrogate Thandi, for want of a better term, were some of these questions that were asked by Sakina, and why does Al Jamaa feel so strongly about this, saying that a certain political agenda is being pursued by asking these questions?
Yeah, so the questions that are highlighted in the piece are a sample of some of the questions that Sakina was putting to Mr. Ahmed, the Johannesburg mayor. And what seems to have come out of that interview is a very controversial, the issue about the 9 billion rand loan that seems to have, interesting, for lack of a better word, repayment terms, and what the comments were after this interview by Al Jamaah, the political party of our mayor, is that the Sakina didn't go into a lot more detail, didn't follow up, didn't give our mayor the chance to talk and unpack issues about this loan. But that's the one issue, it seems. It does seem to be that the party is taking issue with a number of journalists and this apparent agenda that the SABC is pushing. So what the big issue here is for us is that if anyone feels that any kind of media, any journalist is breaching ethics, is going against code of conduct, and there is a complaint, we have complaint mechanisms in place to deal with that. It's not okay to simply say, I'm going to approach the board of the SABC to take this to task and to complain about a whole variety or a whole number of journalists. So that was the other big issue that we wanted to highlight here.
Yes, and also we've seen the leader of Al Jamaah Party, Hanif Hendricks, talking about approaching the SABC and to deal with what he calls the conduct of SABC journalists, talking about reporting the way journalists, including people like Sakina, push certain narratives to determine political outcomes. Now, this is where clarity needs to be obtained. Why would journalists firstly push certain narratives by reporting in certain ways, and how would they determine political outcomes eventually, Thandi?
Yeah, so what we have seen happen in the past, and this isn't the norm, but what we have seen is instances of political interference in an institution like the SABC. We saw this happen in the lead up to the 2016 local elections. And so there is a history of politicians using media to push particular agendas. So if there are political parties at loggerheads or, campaigning against each other, you could see instances of political interference or at least attempts at political interference. And so that seems to be the line that the party has taken in this instance. But from what we take from the interview in question is that there isn't a political narrative being pushed. It was a very tense interview with very harsh questions which the mayor couldn't answer or couldn't give a clear answer. And so, yes, where there is political interference or political agendas being pushed, again, hold media accountable to that. And we at MMA have done that many times over the years, where we've picked up particular bias or coverage in favor unfairly of particular politicians or political parties. And we're the first to approach our complaints mechanisms where that has been the case. And so that is a risk. And it's a very real risk in the lead up to our elections next year. But again, there are appropriate mechanisms in place to deal with issues like that when they occur.
Well, Thandi, we're going to put you on hold. We're going to just go for a quick ad break. We'll be back. I've just got one or two other issues to raise with you before we wind down the program.
All right. Okay.
Do you want to make a real impact this Ramadan? Donate your zakah to Ashraful Aid. Your zakah can help feed an orphan, support a widow, build a home for a refugee family, sponsor a HIF student, and much more. With Ashraful Aid, you can make a real difference. Visit our website at www.ashrafulaid.org to make a donation. Make your Ramadan meaningful with Ashraful Aid.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
In the aftermath of the tragic earthquakes in Syria and Turkey, thousands of survivors are struggling and in need of food, shelter, and life-saving aid. This Ramadan, take a closer look at the countless lives that have been turned upside down. You have the power to help. Your donation is the lifeline, a beacon of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. Please donate today. Visit donate.unhcr.org/RamadanZA.
For a long time, we've lived in a centralized world where institutions held the all-important data and confirmed all transactions. Those times are over. Welcome to Libertas Group, a blockchain development company boasting an ecosystem that continually redefines the way we do business. Our blockchain is decentralized, making it immune to hacking or alteration, putting the power back in your hands with no middleman so you can focus on the growth of your business. Libertas, the simplest investment choice you'll make.
The Prophet ﷺ has said, none of you will have faith that he wishes for his brother what he likes for himself. For thousands of our ummah, wishes are simple needs that we can fulfill. Dates, bread, and clean water for suhoor and iftar. Africa. Join Africa Muslims Agency's Wish campaign this Ramadan to feed the fasting for 100 rands per day, provide a grocery hamper for 1,500 rands per month, and feed a village or camp for 16,000 rands per day. Fulfill the wishes of families in need across the world this Ramadan with AMA. Call AMA now on 011-834-8685 or donate at africamuslimsagency.co.za. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
Well, the time is just gone 23 minutes past 4 as we continue our discussion this afternoon with Thandi Smith, and we are talking about the media, we are talking about Al Jamaa, and clearly they have taken exception to the fact with regard to certain questions that were directed at the mayor of Johannesburg, who is also a member of the Al Jamaa party. We're talking about Tapelo Ahmed, and they felt very, very uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, is this about media bias? Is this about, providing coverage, equitable coverage? But I think the key issue here for journalists is, and Thandi, you mentioned this just before we went on the break, with regard to holding media accountable. But in the same breath, we also need to hold politicians. We also need to hold political parties as media. We need to hold them accountable, because at the end of the day, it is a job, and you mentioned this in your article, that media as a watchdog is to call out the media. Politicians' jobs are to deliver on the election promises and serve the public.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think that at the sort of current state that we're in, as the city of Johannesburg, we've got failing infrastructure. Service delivery is a daily problem, a daily challenge. And, we're dealing with a number of different really serious big challenges. And so when we have a new mayor come in, and we sort of deserve to know what is being done about some of these issues. And so that's where, it is the role of journalists and the media to be asking those questions. And our politicians should know the answers. And if they don't know the answers, then there are appropriate ways of dealing with getting the information that we need to have, that we need to know. And so yes, it is about following up with politicians, following up with those in power, and it is more about the fact that we are holding those in power accountable. It's not just any sort of politician. It's not just any MP or representative in parliament. It's specific positions that hold a lot of power in society that are responsible for ensuring citizens are getting the service delivery promises, as well as, just the service delivery and the promises that have been put forward to us. And so as sort of citizens, we don't have the same kind of access to politicians that the media and that journalists have. And so they do sort of form the messenger, they play that role of engaging with politicians. And exactly that, asking the hard questions that we all need the answers to.
Exactly, and just talking about the questions, and this is something that I think I don't see anything sinister, any agenda that is playing out by Sakina asking these type of questions. These are questions that are on everybody's lips. These are questions that everybody asks, and one cannot hide behind the fact that you're a new mayor, because one of the points that was made is what have they been doing as a collective. He has been part of the council for a long time. The question of passing the buck, all these type of things, the loan, the smart city issue, all of these at the end of the day are valid questions. It is what you and I, as citizens of the city, are witnessing on a day-to-day basis. So again, it's about politicians taking things personally, and they always seem to be somewhat suspicious that there is something out in the background. There is an agenda playing out. I am being nailed, my political party. And we find this not only in the case of Al Jama Party, we've seen it in the past, Thandi, as well, with many other political parties.
Yes, exactly. We have seen this play out with our ruling party, the ANC, with opposition parties, our main opposition, the DA. This is a very, I would want to say, common, or it is a typical relationship between politicians and the media. And it's because a lot of the time, once a politician or a political party get into power, they often don't fulfill their election promises. They don't fulfill their campaigning promises. And so they do get put into a tight corner where they can't necessarily answer the hard questions that media are putting forward to them. Oftentimes they do. It's not all bad. But I do think it's very easy to use the sort of narrative as, it's media's fault, it's media's agenda, as a sort of scapegoat to avoid any of the responsibility. And that's not to say media hasn't messed up. Our journalists do often make mistakes as well. But it's about knowing and understanding when it's simply a mistake, or when media has, pushed the line, gone over the line, or when it is the on the part of the politician in question. And in this case, again, we really feel that the interview, yes, it was possibly tense, it was harsh, but it didn't push that line. It didn't blur any ethical issues.
Well, Thandi, we're going to have to leave it at that. And once again, we do appreciate you taking time out and being part of this broadcast this afternoon right here on Salam Media. And we wish you all the best. Please take care.
Thank you for having me, and a good afternoon to you and your listeners.
Thandi Smith, head of programs at Media Monitoring Africa, with us this afternoon, which brings us straight on to 4:30 p.m. And we are heading for the Asar Azan and the Asar Salah break. We still have got, when we come back, looking at the aftermath of the tragic earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, we will be talking with Aziza Bauda, Partnerships and Philanthropy Officer with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And we're also talking with, at around 5 p.m., with Naren Ganesh. Time for radical change is coming, and he's talking about the whole Magudamana, Beste Saga Tabo Beste at the taxpayers' expense, talking about the high police presence, police officers, and also at the same time looking at how the police have actually failed many other people, because this is now a high-profile situation that has emerged. The humanitarian segment this afternoon is with Sophia Musa from Spiritual Court, and our Nasiha before the time of Iftar is with Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali, the president of the United Ulama Council of South Africa. But right now we're heading for the Asar Azan and the Asar Salah. Stay with us, don't go away.
Oh, so will you therefore attend, or does your conditions, your 10-point plan need to be met first?
They are vital, because if you just attend, then you are just a passenger on the DA's plan. And I don't support their vision for South Africa. Otherwise, I would have stayed in the organization and should endorse it. So at the end of the day, it has to work with that plan. If we don't do that, then let's go that we will end up just discussing positions, and then positions will change.
So I'm looking at that. I mean, I see some parties have confirmed they're attending, others haven't. Just 15 parties were invited. So let's just say that let's get to the obvious. Doesn't matter which parties you and I may be supportive of, right? I think one thing we all agree on: South Africa currently is in a mess. There's no doubt about it. From where you sit at Build One South Africa, for where I sit as a political vision of building a champion nation, there's no question we have serious problems. But if in our united vision to build something greater, we all put together a 10-point plan, so other parties, Action SA does it, and every other one, I mean, isn't there a danger that this convention will never get off the ground?
Well, I think that's, given that it's a year before election, that is a bit like setting up a CODESA of some sort, so that we can have a proper discussion. Because then, before you discuss any other thing, you must spend an inordinate amount of time really debating issues about how do we fix energy, how do we keep people safe, how do we think the state as it works at the moment with all provinces works? Do you want direct election? These spark the discussion you want to have. Because at the end of the day, once you've done all of those things, you can then, when you go to election 2024, a year on from now, really have a pact that's substantive rather than a loose arrangement. It's a bit like trying to arrange a marriage and simply just saying, no, we'll sort out where the house is, where we live, all of those things after. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with it then. The risk we face as South Africa, to your earlier point that South Africa is in a mess, is that all you'll end up doing is just changing the colors of who's in executive, but govern exactly the same way, which will deliver exactly the same outcomes.